All right, hi everyone. My name is Elisa, and I wanted to share with you my roundtable semester project. For this, I did an infographic, and I will zoom in a little bit, but I wanted you to first go down to the focus question. So let me see if I can do that with us. So what is your familiarity with the multi-genre projects? When and if you teach, where do you incorporate creative projects or assignments into your curriculum? And do you have creative assignments for all levels you teach? And what do you value most about creative assignments? So let's get started. And I'm just gonna scroll back up to the top here. So currently I teach sophomore honors at a high school in Merrimack, New Hampshire. I have 3 sections of this class, and the class size is approximately 20 to 25 students. The majority of students in the class are in several honors classes and have taken honors classes in the past. There are students who petition to get into the class who are not in honors English as freshmen, which makes up about 20% of the students in the class. Last year, the freshman honors teacher and myself worked hard to align our curriculum and ensured that there was a clear scope and sequence for our students' first 2 years in honors English. This has already proved to be beneficial, as I've noticed my students are better prepared for the expectations of sophomore honors, as it has enabled me to build upon these skills. Most in the district view sophomore honors English as the mini AP literature course. This makes sense to me as we read mostly fiction and write based on what we've read in class. Just last week, my department head came to me to inquire about AP Seminar, which is the AP offering for sophomore English. I'm intrigued by this, but for several reasons, I'm not interested in pursuing it. The biggest barrier is I am currently the AP coordinator for my district. But that's not the most important reason. For me, it's my fear that AP Seminar will box me into a set curriculum with set writing activities, usually put out by a college board. I suspect an AP course with its requirements will not allow me to incorporate creative writing. I know that my rigor and requirements match with a mini AP course, but I'm reluctant to make it official if I can incorporate a form of writing I see as valuable. And I'd also like to add, we offer AP Lang and AP Lit to students when they become juniors and seniors. So what exactly is my question, and what do I want to address? Currently, there is very little creative writing in my course in its current form, and we never do personal narratives. That's usually reserved for senior year. It just doesn't seem to fit in with the required reading and writing of the course. Most of our writing activities center on literary analyses, work with literary criticism, and producing argumentative essays. I do often ask my students to write reflections, which harkens back to our class article from Yancey. But these activities are small and short, as I usually ask students to reflect on the writing projects they've completed or group work. When I think of the practice-based question I'd like to address for my final project in this course, I'd like to implement a writing activity, project, or assignment that asks my students to be more creative. I still want there to be sophomore honors level rigor, and I want to honor the core of the course, which is an in-depth study of literature. This is not to suggest that creative writing is not rigorous. I believe it very much is. In fact, I think it is harder and more rigorous than much of the formulaic writing we do with our students, such as the argumentative essay I spoke of earlier. I do think there is a notion that creative writing in the honors or gifted classroom is not rigorous, and I'm not sure where that idea came from. Even my students have been known to groan when I introduce an assignment that taps into their creativity. Maybe I've been interpreting those moans incorrectly. Perhaps my students groan because they know it will require a different set of skills they'll need to tap into, which can be very challenging, especially if they're used to relying on a set skill set. but I want my students to not always have to write formulaically, which is all I have expected from them in the past. When I teach seniors, I see the motivation and investment when the writing is authentic and real world. Assignments like personal narratives and resumes seem to draw out even the most reluctant writers. I'd like to spark my sophomores' creativity and their curiosity, though I do recognize that my honors level students are innately motivated regardless of the assignment. It's just how they are. So for my prospectus, I took a look at the research and scholarship from some of the articles we studied this semester. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but most importantly, I want my writing to be authentic and applicable. I want the writing to be real world, or at least as close to real world as I can get. This was especially addressed in our early reading by Wargo, where she used the phrase latent authenticity. Though the anticipated activities in my classroom will be simulations, I want my students to see the authenticity and value in doing them, even though they may not be real world or real people. I want the writing my students to do to aid them in what Wargo calls developing agency. It can be a bridge, as Wargo described it. I'd like my work that the students do to be collected in some sort of portfolio. I'm not sure if it will be digital or physical, but I really enjoyed our discussions on portfolios and have brainstormed some new ways to approach this from our in-class discussions. And this harkens back to the articles by Janice and Upshur and by Lamb. A quote that struck me this semester came from the Kennedy and Hicks article. It stated, rethinking research writing as a multimedia story-making rendered the familiar strange, reinforcing student inquiry, while also cultivating important skills for composing using multiple modes. This all seems a little familiar strange to me, but I want my students to use multiple modes, and I like how Kennedy and Hicks emphasize the idea of inquiry, which I want to be really at the heart of any creative assignment I give my students. Now let's go on to what I researched this week. So this week I focused on looking for more scholarship on my practice-based question, this idea of incorporating more creativity into the honors classroom. So the first article was entitled Enrichment in Gifted Education Pedagogy to Develop Talents, Gifts, and Creative Productivity. This was a paper by Rice and Razzulli and discusses the critical role of fostering talents, gifts, and I loved this phrase, creative productivity in all students, not just gifted students. The central goal of this article was to provide challenging and engaging learning opportunities that motivate students and transform them from passive learners to first-hand inquirers, which again goes right back to what Kennedy and Hicks was saying. The authors conclude that these enrichment experiences increase student engagement, achievement, and creative productivity, and provide crucial, effective support that can help prevent underachievement. So I thought that really spoke to what I want to study. The second article was entitled Integrating and Sustaining Creativity in the ELA Classroom. This one was especially relevant, so I thought this was a great one to incorporate. This was an essay by Morgan Bantanian, where she argues for the critical role of integrating creativity regularly into the English classroom. She contends that when teachers properly incorporate creative activities, students can significantly enhance both their personal and academic skills, and most importantly, develop higher order thinking. The first text addresses the difficulty in implementing creativity due to a lack of the text goes on to talk about how difficult it is to implement creativity because there really is a lack of a universal definition. I don't have a definition of creativity, and therefore I think that's why I was so quick to make assumptions about it and stigmatize creativity as not being rigorous. That's something that really came through in my prospectus. So here's the definition she provides. She says that creativity helps solve problems, makes new connections and see new meanings, encourages students to use their imagination, and is considered complex, learnable, central to success, and influenced by context. Ultimately, Bananum, Bananan, ban, yeah, Morgan Bananum said her essay talks about fostering creativity is actually an obligation for teachers to better prepare students for the complex world they're going to face and to promote deeper and more exploratory learning. So I loved that from her. Moving on to the next article, this is The Fundamentals of Creativity by Bagetto and Kaufman, who seem to be really the leaders and the frontiers of creativity in the gifted classroom. In their article, they provide educators with 5 foundational guidelines to help them successfully integrate student creativity into their curriculum. The authors aim to combat the view that creativity is a burdensome addition to an already packed schedule, and I think this is something I've been feeling. So the article, like the previous one, talks about providing a definition of creativity. Their definition says that creativity takes more than originality. There are different levels of creativity, context matters, and creativity comes at a cost. And that there's a time and place for creativity. One quote that really struck me was, but without a clear understanding of the nature of creativity itself, such well-meaning advocacy may do more harm than good. Educators may experience calls for teaching creativity as just another guilt-inducing addition to an already overwhelming set of curricular demands. And I think that's why a lot of teachers don't incorporate creativity. Another article that I saw this week was by Forgeard and Kaufman. Notice Kaufman comes up again, entitled Who Cares About Imagination, Creativity, and Innovation, and Why? Their conclusion was that oftentimes we implicitly assume that the audience already knows what creativity is and that what we know the traits of it. By doing this, this provides missed opportunities to clearly articulate the broader significance and unique benefits of studying creativity, and I couldn't agree more with that. Finally, we have another article which was actually a chapter in the book Nurturing Creativity in the Classroom, and I really liked that this chapter was by Bagetto and Kaufman. And so they talk about how the idea of creativity in the classroom has continued to broaden. Their quote is as saying, many people now recognize that classroom creativity is much more than a distracting tangent, something to be explored later, or even a behavior problem. Indeed, creativity has become a hot topic in education. They go on to say, this is, of course, does not mean that creativity has become the centerpiece of the everyday curriculum. There are still instances where creativity is squeezed out of the curriculum. Indeed, this can happen anytime schools turn to extreme measures such as scripted or teacher-proof curricula. In my comments from Dr. Nielsen, she pointed out my desire for a strong curriculum and a well-rounded curriculum. It was an interesting observation because I'm not sure where I get this notion from and what exactly is a strong or well-rounded curriculum. The scholarship and research on creativity and the gifted classroom has already started to change my thoughts and stigmas on creativity in my honors classroom. For me, I've spent several years since before COVID developing my sophomore curriculum. I remember when my department head asked me to take on the honors course, and I told her I didn't think I was ready. Perhaps a bit of imposter syndrome was coming into play here. I just didn't consider myself an honors teacher. I was always and continue to always look to see how I can improve. I'm not sure why that is the case, but I always am doing that. My desire for more creative writing is rooted in this ever-evolving curriculum I've worked so hard on. I feel like I see a need or a gap in my students' experience in my classroom. I value creative writing, so I want my students to value it and see it as authentic too. I can't help but mention this from earlier and feel that there is some sort of stigma still attached with creative writing, especially in the gifted classroom. In terms of enriching the scholarship, I believe that the pressure placed on honors students and the teachers of honors students is great. There is often a curriculum to follow, especially if you teach early college or AP. There is pressure to prepare students for the next course in their sequence, and there is pressure to cover a lot of material. So I'm hopeful that my project will continue the discussion on creativity and inquiry, but most importantly, I hope that my plate will encourage other high school honors teachers to expand their curriculum so that students are provided with a more well-rounded set of writing activities in the honors classroom. The research thus far supports creativity and even says it promotes higher order thinking in students. I want a lesson or project or unit that will result in some sort of portfolio, and I want there to be an element of reflection, as I think that makes the work more authentic. This week we shared our research activities. I was especially intrigued by Ashley's idea. For her project, she asked her middle schoolers to research an author of their choice and create a multi-genre project. For this project, Ashley explained that her students will create artifacts, which may include but are not limited to personal letters, marriage certificates, diary entries, birth certificates, awards, or photographs. This is something I'd like to explore further. I want to look up literature on multi-genres and creativity. Ashley explained how each artifact was rooted in research on the student's chosen author and had to maintain historical accuracy. This project did seem plagiarism resistant, as Ashley mentioned, and could be presented as a portfolio or collection of work. I also really liked how Ashley incorporated reflection. It was such a great research activity and had me wondering if I could create a similar project. So next steps for me include researching multi-genres in the high school classroom and hopefully starting to outline a creative project for my honor students. Things I want to keep in mind is making it authentic, utilizing a portfolio type presentation, having it be multimodal, and asking students to reflect throughout the project. I'm not sure where to start, but I think some research on multi-genre projects and looking at some samples may be beneficial. I also want to think about where I want to incorporate this project and how I'm going to incorporate it. I want to keep my desired scope and sequence in mind, but I think I have room to work this type of creative project into my honors curriculum. So again, below is the focus question. I'm so sorry I took up so much time, but thanks guys.